I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who writes something like this. But here I am, staring at my screen, trying to make sense of how everything changed because of one unexpected moment. It started with something so simple, me changing clothes in my bedroom, door cracked just slightly, thinking I was alone. My name doesn't matter. What matters is the years I gave to a marriage that stopped feeling like one long ago. My husband and I had been drifting apart for years. At first, it was the usual stuff: work, stress, exhaustion. Then it was silence. He stopped noticing me, stopped touching me, stopped looking at me the way he used to. I became invisible in my own home. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages settle, that maybe I was asking for too much. But deep down, I was starving for something: connection, attention, maybe just to feel like a woman again. And then he moved in. My husband's son from his first marriage, Josh. I'd met him only a handful of times before. Polite, quiet, athletic. The kind of young man mothers brag about. He'd lost his apartment, needed a place for a few months, and we had the extra room. I didn't think twice about it. At least not at first. Josh didn't say much, but he watched. I caught his eyes on me sometimes, nothing inappropriate, but something lingered. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A kind of curiosity. Interest. I brushed it off as my imagination, or just wishful thinking. I mean, what would a young guy like him see in me? But then little things started happening. He'd offer to help with groceries, clean up the kitchen without being asked. One afternoon, I was in the garden struggling with the hose, and he came out to help. His hand brushed mine, light, quick, but it stayed with me the rest of the day. I told myself I was overthinking, reading too much into things. Still, I started to notice him more. The way he filled out his t-shirts. The way he smelled after a shower. Clean, warm, young. I hated myself for noticing. I was a married woman, for God's sake. His stepmother. But the truth is, I hadn't felt desired in so long. And Josh looked at me like I mattered. It was a Wednesday. Nothing special. I came home from work early. The house was quiet. I kicked off my shoes, grabbed a towel, and went to the bedroom to change. I shut the door behind me, or at least I thought I had. The arousal made it stick sometimes. I undressed, not in a rush, just enjoying the quiet. I took off my blouse, unclasped my bra, and reached for a shirt when I heard the door creak. He was just standing there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, frozen. His gaze dropped for a second before he jerked his head away. I grabbed the shirt, held it to my chest, heart racing. "Josh," I started. "I'm sorry." I thought. His voice cracked and he turned around, stepping back out. "I'm sorry." The door shut. I stood there, completely still, heart thudding like a drum. My body buzzed, not with fear, but something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the moment over and over. The way his eyes had locked with mine. He'd seen me, really seen me. Not just my body, but the surprise, the softness, the vulnerability. And he didn't look away like my husband would have. He didn't look bored or irritated or distracted. He looked stunned, breathless. I hated myself for the way it made me feel. Alive. Like I mattered again. I buried my face in my pillow and told myself it was a mistake. He hadn't meant anything by it. He was embarrassed. I was being ridiculous. But then the next morning, everything felt different. He was quiet at breakfast, avoiding my eyes. But I noticed the flush in his cheeks, the way his hand trembled slightly when he lifted his coffee cup. I wasn't imagining things anymore. There was a tension, a thread pulled tight between us, vibrating with something unspoken. Over the next few days, we barely interacted. But the silence said more than words ever could. We were both thinking about it, both remembering. I'd find myself glancing at the clock, wondering when he'd be home. I'd put on lipstick before dinner, even if I hadn't worn any all day. I started wearing softer fabrics. Just subtle things. Things my husband never noticed. Josh did. One night, I was in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed, pouring myself a glass of wine. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt it, the shift in the air. He walked in just sweatpants and a tank top, rubbing the back of his neck. Couldn't sleep? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head. You? I nodded. Same. We stood there for a second, just breathing in the same quiet. Then he said, about the other day. I didn't mean to. I know. I cut in. It was an accident. He looked at me then. Really looked. You're really beautiful. I should have told him to stop. Should have reminded him who I was. That this was wrong. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart thudding, face flushed. Thank you, I whispered. He walked closer. Not touching. Just close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin. Good night, he said, voice low. Good night. I watched him walk away. And when I went back to bed, I didn't dream about my husband. I dreamed about Josh. I started questioning everything after that. My marriage. My worth. My desires. I told myself it was just a moment. Nothing more. But deep down I knew better. Something had shifted. Something I couldn't take back. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. I told myself it had to stop. That night in the kitchen was already too far. A compliment shouldn't have made my heart race like that. Not from him. I avoided being alone with Josh for days, going out more, staying busy with chores that didn't need to be done. But it only made things worse. Every time I saw him, there was a flicker, some wordless energy neither of us could suppress. It wasn't just lust. It was awareness. And once you feel that with someone, it doesn't go away. I noticed the way he lingered longer in the kitchen when I was there. The way his eyes would track me when he thought I wasn't looking. I started to crave it. Not the act, not even the attention, just the feeling of being visible again. Every touchless encounter was charged. Our hands would brush when passing something, and I'd pretend not to notice. But I noticed everything. The way his voice dropped when he spoke, just to me. How his eyes softened, like I was the only one in the room. One evening, we ended up on the patio while my husband snored inside. We talked about nothing, music, weather, random memories. I don't remember the words, only how he looked at me. No boyish awkwardness. Just intensity. When I laughed, he smiled like it meant something. I forgot how that felt. He told me his friends didn't really get him, that he felt like an outsider sometimes, even in his own family. I told him I understood, probably more than I should have. He didn't ask questions about my marriage, but he didn't have to. He saw everything in the silence. I told him I used to paint, that I hadn't touched a brush in years. He asked why. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't expose how empty things had become. He said, "You're still that person. You just need someone to remind you." I froze. That line should have sent me running. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. We sat in silence for a while, but everything between us was loud. That night, I lay in bed restless. I replayed our conversation over and over. I imagined his fingers brushing my cheek, his lips finding mine. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I'd wake up, still feeling the imprint of a dream where he touched me like I was something delicate, something worth holding. The next time we were alone, it wasn't accidental. I was in the hallway. He walked past close, too close, and paused behind me. Neither of us moved. My breath caught. He whispered my name. Just that. And it wasn't what he said, it was how. Like a question. Like a plea. Like he needed me to say it was okay. I turned slowly. Our eyes met. And that was the moment everything changed. He touched my arm. Lightly, waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. We were standing in the house my husband and I built, and all I could think about was Josh's breath so close to mine. We didn't kiss. Not then. But it was louder than a kiss. It was permission. After that, the boundaries blurred fast. We found ways to be alone. I'd sit on the edge of the couch while he sat too close. Our legs would touch. We'd hold eye contact longer than we should. One night, he reached for my hand. I let him. Our fingers laced together, like it had always been that way. We sat in silence, palms pressed tight, hearts louder than words. He didn't treat me like a mistake. He treated me like something precious. He listened when I spoke. He remembered what I liked. When I made dinner, he'd say thank you and mean it. It felt foreign. My husband hadn't looked up from his phone during a meal in years. One afternoon, we were alone again. I was folding laundry, and he walked in. Our eyes met, and I knew what was going to happen. No planning, no dramatic pause, just inevitability. He stepped closer. My pulse quickened. I should have stepped away. Should have reminded him who I was. But I didn't. I let him take my face in his hands and kiss me. It was soft, gentle, but it lit something in me I thought was dead. My arms wrapped around him before I realized they'd moved. His lips tasted like risk, like danger, like freedom. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us said a word. There was nothing to say. We had crossed a line and we both knew it. After that, there was no turning back. The guilt came fast and sharp. I'd wake up beside my husband, and all I could think about was how I had betrayed him. But at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about how Josh made me feel. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. I felt seen, heard, wanted. He started finding reasons to come close. To brush his fingers against my waist when passing by. To lean in too close when asking me something. I started anticipating those moments. Dressing with more thought. Lip gloss. Light perfume. Things I hadn't cared about in years. My husband didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. One evening, Josh and I were in the living room while my husband worked late. A movie played, but we weren't watching. I could feel the tension like static between us. He shifted closer. Our thighs touched. I didn't move. He reached for my hand. I let him intertwine our fingers again, like it meant something. Maybe it did. He whispered, "This feels real." I should have said no. Should have told him we were playing with fire. But instead, I whispered back, "I know." We kissed again that night. This time deeper, needier. My hands were in his hair, his arms wrapped around my waist. We were both shaking. When we finally broke apart, I told him this couldn't happen again. That it was wrong. That we had to stop. He nodded. But his eyes told the truth. We both knew we wouldn't stop. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a fantasy. It became a need. We started sneaking moments wherever we could. Soft kisses in the hallway. Long stares across the room. One night, we sat in his room with the door cracked, my hand resting on his knee. We didn't speak. We just existed there, tangled in a silence full of what-ifs. I told myself we hadn't really done anything yet, that it was only kissing, only touches, that it wasn't cheating. But I knew better. My body belonged to one man. My heart was slipping into another. And the scariest part was how right it felt. It was no longer something I could pretend wasn't happening. We crossed the final line one afternoon when the house was quiet, and every second since it felt like a secret pressed against my chest. It wasn't rushed or chaotic. It was slow, intentional. There was no fumbling, no guilt in the moment, only the undeniable feeling of being exactly where I wanted to be. His hands on my skin didn't feel wrong. They felt overdue. Everything about it was quiet. Our breathing, the way we looked at each other, how careful he was with me. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. I didn't expect to feel comfort. I didn't expect to feel cherished. But that's exactly what he gave me. Not just attention, not just desire, but care. The kind of care I had long forgotten. My husband hadn't kissed me like that in years, hadn't whispered my name like it meant something. Josh did. Every touch felt like he was memorizing me. Afterward, I sat in silence. My body still humming, my mind fractured between bliss and panic. I was someone's wife. He was my stepson. But none of those labels matched what had just happened. I felt guilty, yes, but also alive. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what I'd done, what we'd done, but I couldn't regret it. That night, I couldn't meet my husband's eyes. He came home, poured a drink, asked about dinner. I gave him the same tired answer I always did. He didn't notice my flushed skin or the way my hands trembled. He didn't look at me. He hadn't in a long time. And that's how I justified it, how I allowed myself to believe this wasn't just betrayal, but reclamation. Of my body, my desire, my right to feel wanted. The next few days were a blur of secrecy and glances. Josh and I barely spoke around others. But when we were alone, it was different. Every word, every touch carried weight. I found myself listening for his footsteps, craving his nearness. I knew I was losing control. I just didn't care. He texted me one afternoon, "I can't stop thinking about you." I stared at the message longer than I should have. I deleted it, then stared at the empty screen, missing the words I couldn't keep. We became bold, reckless even. A brush of fingers in the hallway. A kiss stolen behind a closed door. I hated how much I loved it, how much I craved it. I started lying more, saying I was going out for errands when I just needed air. I was terrified someone would notice, but that fear only made it worse. The risk became part of the pull. The tension sharpened everything. I looked in the mirror one morning and barely recognized myself. I saw color in my cheeks, a softness around my eyes. I had started wearing perfume again, shaving my legs without reason. These weren't things I did for my husband. I did them because Josh noticed. One afternoon, we met in his room under the guise of helping him with something. He kissed me like he'd been starving, like I was something he couldn't go another day without. I wasn't innocent anymore. I kissed him back, just as hard. I let my hands roam, my mouth linger. When it was over, I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. It sounded too calm for the storm we'd created. After that, we didn't try to slow down. We didn't pretend anymore. We were in this. Deep. It wasn't just about sex. That was part of it, yes. But it was also about what he gave me, presence. He listened when I spoke. He remembered small things. He made me feel like I mattered. One night, he brought me a book I had mentioned weeks before. Just handed it to me with a shy smile. That moment shook me more than anything physical. He was listening. My husband never remembered anything I said, not like that. I began to dread my husband's presence. Not because I feared being caught, but because every minute with him reminded me of how disconnected we were. I stopped trying. Stopped forcing conversation. Stopped pretending I still cared the way I once did. I didn't feel like his wife anymore. I felt like a shadow he lived with. Josh filled every empty space, every void my marriage had left. And I let him. I encouraged it. I don't know when the guilt faded, but it did. It turned into longing, into comfort, into something dangerously close to love. He started getting possessive. Subtle things. Asking where I was going, who I was texting. At first, it felt flattering. Then it started to make me nervous. I reminded him this couldn't last, that it wasn't real. He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. "It's real to me," he said. I didn't know how to respond, because it was real to me too. Just not sustainable. I knew the risk, knew the explosion waiting to happen, but I still wasn't ready to walk away. One evening we fought. He said I was treating him like a mistake. I told him this wasn't love. It was a moment, a blur, a fire that would burn everything down. He stared at me for a long time, jaw clenched, eyes wet. Then he said, "I'd still choose it." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake beside my husband, thinking about Josh's words, thinking about the way I felt in his arms, thinking about how far I'd fallen and how little I wanted to climb back out. We didn't stop. Even after the fight, we just got quieter, more careful. He'd leave notes under my pillow, little messages that made my heart ache and swell. "I miss your laugh. You're the only person who sees me. Please don't pretend this isn't real." One day, I found a necklace in my drawer. Simple, silver, with a tiny heart. No note, just that. I wore it under my shirt for weeks. A secret only we knew. I touched it whenever I passed him in the hallway, and he'd smile, without saying a word. I didn't tell him I loved him, but I think he knew. And that was the worst part, how deeply he believed in what we were. How much I started to believe it too. But underneath it all, something darker was growing. The fear of being found out. The guilt I had buried so deep began to crawl back. I couldn't hide forever. Something had to give. I didn't know when. I didn't know how, but I felt it coming. And when it did, it would destroy everything. I woke up that morning knowing something had changed. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, just a shift in the air. A feeling I couldn't explain, only recognize. Josh had become distant over the past few days. No messages. No glances. When I passed him in the hall, he barely looked up. It was subtle, but enough to unsettle everything inside me. I kept replaying our last conversation, wondering if I said something wrong or if the weight of our secret had finally caught up to him. I tried to tell myself it was for the best, that maybe he was finally letting go, and I should too. But the truth was, the distance hurt more than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I'd come to rely on him, emotionally, mentally, even physically. The silence felt colder than guilt ever had. Later that evening, I found him outside alone. He didn't speak when I approached, just kept his eyes forward, face unreadable. I stood next to him, saying nothing at first. Then, quietly, I asked, "Are you okay?" He nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "We can't keep pretending this isn't dangerous," I whispered. "Someone's going to notice." He finally looked at me. "I already noticed. I can't sleep. I can't think. I can't do anything without feeling like I'm lying to everyone." I wanted to reach for him, but I didn't. "Do you regret it?" I asked. He looked away. "No, but it's killing me." That was when I knew. It wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about what it was doing to us, what it was turning us into. I thought I could compartmentalize it, keep it separate from the rest of my life. But I was wrong. It had started bleeding into everything. My moods, my sleep, even my body language. I was unraveling. That week, I started pulling away. Not because I didn't want him, but because I knew what had to be done. We stopped talking when no one else was around. I avoided him even when my chest ached to be near him. I thought it would get easier. It didn't. One night, I caught him watching me from across the room. His eyes were tired, and there was pain in them I hadn't seen before. I forced myself to look away. My husband was beside me, asking about bills or groceries or something mundane, and all I could think about was Josh's gaze. Everything felt heavy. He came to me one last time. Quietly. Late. He knocked once and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "Not like this." I wanted to cry. "I know," I whispered. He sat down next to me, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "I wish we met somewhere else. Somewhere we didn't have to hide." I nodded. But we didn't. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. We just sat there, both knowing it was the end. Not because we wanted it to be, but because it had to be. If we didn't stop now, it would come crashing down, and when it did, it would take more than just us with it. After he left, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. My chest was tight. My body felt empty. I had asked for this. I had chosen this. But I didn't feel powerful or in control. I felt like someone grieving something she was never allowed to have in the first place. The days that followed were numb. I fell back into my role, performing the routines of a life that no longer felt like mine. I cooked. I smiled. I cleaned. But I wasn't there. Not really. Josh avoided me now, not out of anger, but self-preservation. We became polite strangers in a house full of secrets. My husband never noticed. That part hurt the most. I had been a storm, a wreck, a burning woman tangled in another man, and he never once looked at me closely enough to see it. He still asked the same questions, gave the same half-interested nods, made love to me like checking off a box. I lay there quietly, pretending I wasn't somewhere else. Someone else. Then it happened. My husband found the necklace. It had slipped between the couch cushions. I didn't even know it was missing. He held it up one night, brow furrowed. "Is this yours?" I froze. My throat tightened. "Yeah. I think it's old. Must have fallen." He nodded, didn't ask more. But I saw the thought flash in his eyes. Just for a second. A question he didn't want the answer to. He never brought it up again. But something shifted. He started watching me more closely. Small things. Noticing when I picked up my phone. asking why I was taking so long at the store. I realized then, it didn't take a discovery to destroy trust. Just suspicion. And even though he never said it, I think he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Josh withdrew more and more. He started staying out longer, making plans, talking about moving. I didn't ask where. I didn't need to. He was trying to find distance, trying to breathe. The last time we spoke, it was brief. He thanked me, not for what happened, but for making him feel something, for reminding him that he wasn't invisible. I didn't respond. My heart couldn't take it. He walked away, and I knew I wouldn't see him the same way again. Eventually, he left, moved in with friends. My husband mentioned it casually one day, like it was a passing event. He said he needed space, he muttered. Good for him. I nodded, said nothing. That night, I stood in the hallway where it all began, staring at the silence. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I just stood there, listening to the absence. There's no clean end to stories like these. No resolution that makes sense. I still think about him. Not with regret. Not with longing. Just remembrance. He became a chapter one never expected, but one I can't deny shaped me. He taught me how far I'd drifted from myself, and how dangerous it is to find someone who sees you when you're desperate to be seen. My marriage survived. Barely. But I didn't. Not in the way I was before. I am quieter now. More measured. I don't reach for things the way I used to. I keep secrets in my eyes that no one asks about. And sometimes late at night I wonder if he ever looks back. If he thinks of me. If he remembers the way we fell. Not because we wanted to, but because we needed to feel something before we disappeared into the lives we were pretending to live. Some stories aren't lessons. They're just echoes. And I hear his in every quiet room.